The shuttle bay doors hissed open, and I felt my primary stomach clench with something approaching actual interest. In 17 cycles of overseeing admissions at the Galactic Military Institute, I had processed exactly 4,623 cadets. Every single one arrived with the same look: nervous, excited, terrified, or some combination thereof. They clutched their acceptance tablets like lifelines, gawked at the floating architecture, and generally behaved like younglings seeing technology for the first time. This one was different. She walked through those doors like she owned the place, which, let me tell you, nobody does. Not even Commander Vrax, and he literally signed the authorization forms. The human female carried a single bag, worn and patched in several places, and her eyes swept across the crystalline towers and anti-gravity platforms with the bored expression of someone reviewing a grocery list. "Name?" I asked, my mandibles clicking with what I hoped sounded like authority. "Kira Vale." Her voice was flat, unimpressed. She handed over her tablet without looking at me. I scanned the credentials, then scanned them again. Then I checked the verification codes 3 times, because surely, this had to be some kind of administrative error. But no, the codes were legitimate. The clearances were beyond anything I had ever seen. This human, this scrawny thing that barely reached my shoulder plating, had security authorization that made senior admirals look like cafeteria staff. "There must be some mistake," I said, "because what else do you say when reality stops making sense?" "No mistake." She looked at me then, really looked, and I felt something cold slide down my dorsal spine. Her eyes were gray, the color of deep space between stars, and they held the kind of stillness that comes from watching entire worlds burn. "Is my quarters assignment ready? Or should I stand here while you figure out how to do your job?" Oh, I did not like this human, not one bit. "Level 47, Section Gamma, Room 12, I muttered, shoving the tablet back at her. "Welcome to the Institute." She walked away without another word, and I watched her go with the distinct feeling that I had just failed some kind of test I hadn't known I was taking. By the time I filed my report and made it to the orientation hall, rumors were already spreading like radiation from a breached core. The other admissions officers had processed their students without incident, meaning everyone was now focused entirely on the mysterious human in Section Gamma. "I heard she killed a Vraxian honor guard with her bare hands," whispered Toller, one of the junior tactical instructors. "I heard she's actually a spy for the Terran Intelligence Corps," countered Misha, a Zenthari pilot trainer. "I heard she once ate an entire Graken war beast for breakfast," added someone from the back, which was so ridiculous that even the rumor mill fell silent for a moment. I settled into my observation perch and activated the holoscreen. Below, 300 cadets filed into the assembly arena, a massive space designed to accommodate beings of every size and atmospheric requirement. The human, Kira Vale, sat in the back corner, as far from everyone else as physically possible. She had changed into the standard cadet uniform, gray and unremarkable, but somehow she made it look like tactical gear. Commander Vrax took the platform, his scales gleaming under the ambient light. He was an impressive figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with ceremonial armor that had seen actual combat. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had earned every commendation pinned to his chest. "Cadets," he began, and the room fell silent. "You have been selected from millions of applicants across 200 systems. You represent the finest military minds in the known galaxy. Some of you will become tacticians. Some will become pilots. Some will lead fleets into battle. And some of you will fail." He paused, letting that sink in. The failure rate at this institute is 73%. Most of you will not make it past the first semester. Those who do will be forged into something greater than you currently are. You will be tested in ways you cannot imagine. You will face simulations designed by master strategists, physical trials created by elite warriors, and psychological evaluations administered by experts in breaking minds. I watched the cadets shift nervously. Good. Fear was healthy. Fear kept you alive. Your first assignment begins now, Vrax continued. You will form teams of 5. These teams will be your operational units for the remainder of your time here. Choose wisely. The bonds you forge today may determine whether you survive tomorrow. The arena erupted into controlled chaos as cadets scrambled to form groups. Friendships formed in seconds. Alliances built on species compatibility and shared background. Within minutes, most teams had solidified. Kira Vale did not move from her seat. Problem, Cadet? Brax's voice cut through the noise like a plasma blade. Every head turned, every eye focused on the human sitting alone in the corner. She stood slowly, deliberately, and the silence that fell was absolute. No problem, Commander, just waiting for the inevitable. And what? Vrax asked with dangerous calm. Would that be? The part where nobody wants to team with the human, so you assign me to whichever group is short a member. She said it without emotion, without bitterness, like she was reading technical specifications. Saves time. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through some cadets. Others looked genuinely offended. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 12 cycles ago, and their reputation was, shall we say, mixed. Violent, unpredictable, emotionally unstable. They had won their admission to the greater community through a series of border conflicts that had left several established powers seriously reconsidering their expansion policies. Actually, a voice called out, we could use a 5th. I craned my neck to see who had spoken. A Caldrian male named Renix, built like a siege tank and about as subtle. His team consisted of a Vorn female called Lisa, who looked like she could calculate hyperspace jumps in her head, a Kethran named Brix, with 4 arms and an attitude problem, and a Zenthari pilot designated Kel, who still had juvenile markings on her wing membranes. Kira looked at them for a long moment, then shrugged. Sure. Why not? If Vrax was surprised by this development, his face did not show it. Team assignments are now locked. Report to your designated training sectors in 1 hour. Dismissed. The observation deck gave me a perfect view of Training Sector 7, where Renix's team had been assigned their first simulation. Standard procedure? A hostage extraction scenario on a hostile station with limited intelligence and even more limited time. Most teams approached it with textbook precision, following established protocols and tactical doctrine. Kira's team was not most teams. Okay, Renix said, pulling up the mission parameters on his wrist display. Standard extraction. We go in quiet, locate the hostages, neutralize guards, extract via maintenance tunnels. Simple. Boring, Brix countered, flexing all 4 arms. Why sneak when we can fight? Because fighting gets hostages killed, Lissa said, her voice sharp with barely contained irritation. We need to be smart about this. What do you think? Kel asked, turning to Kira. You have not said anything. The human had been standing apart from the group, studying the holographic layout with the same bored expression she had worn in the shuttle bay. Now she looked up, and something in her posture changed. Not much. Just enough. The scenario is designed for you to fail, she said. Renix blinked. What? Look at the guard rotations. Look at the sensor coverage. Look at the extraction windows. Kira gestured at the hologram, highlighting sections with quick, precise movements. Every textbook approach has been accounted for and countered. If you go in quiet, you trigger silent alarms here and here. If you go in loud, reinforcements arrive faster than you can secure the hostages. The maintenance tunnels are monitored. The ventilation shafts are trapped. This is not a test of tactical execution. It is a test of problem-solving under impossible conditions. The team stared at her. "So what do we do?" Lissa asked slowly. Kira smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "We cheat." What followed was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. Instead of infiltrating the station, Kira had Kel take the team shuttle and ram it directly into the station's docking bay at full speed. The simulation registered catastrophic damage, multiple hull breaches, and station-wide emergency protocols activating. While guards rushed to secure the breach, Kira led the team through the chaos wearing emergency evacuation suits marked with station security identifiers. "You forged security credentials?" Renix hissed as they moved through a corridor filled with panicking civilians. "Borrowed," Kira corrected. "Lissa pulled them from the station database during the approach." "I did what?" Lissa looked genuinely shocked. "You had 14 seconds while I was distracting their communication officer with a fake distress call," Kira explained, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "You accessed their system, copied 3 security profiles, and uploaded them to our suits. Good work." "I do not remember doing any of that." "Muscle memory. You will remember later." They reached the detention level just as the last guards were evacuating to deal with the docking bay disaster. The hostages were right where the briefing had indicated, locked behind energy barriers that would take precious minutes to bypass through conventional means. Brix raised his arms to start working on the controls. "Do not bother," Kira said. She walked up to the nearest power junction, pulled out a small plasma torch, and cut directly into the conduit. Sparks flew. Lights flickered. The energy barriers dropped. "That could have electrocuted you," Kel shrieked. But it did not. Kira was already moving, herding confused hostages toward the exit. "Renix, you are on rear guard. Lissa, plot us an exit route that avoids the main corridors. Brix, you carry anyone who cannot move fast enough. Kel, get back to the shuttle and prep it for emergency departure." "The shuttle is destroyed," Kel protested. "No, the simulation thinks it is destroyed because I had Lissa send false damage reports while we were crashing. It is actually fine. Mostly, probably. Go." They moved through the station like a natural disaster, leaving confused guards and bypassed security protocols in their wake. By the time Station Command realized what was happening, the team was already at the docking bay, with all hostages accounted for. The simulation ended with a harsh klaxon and flashing lights indicating mission success. In the observation deck, I stared at the results screen with my mouth hanging open in a way that was definitely not dignified for a senior officer. Mission completion time, 8 minutes, 42 seconds. Current record, 23 minutes, 15 seconds. Casualties, 0. Collateral damage, catastrophic but entirely simulated. Commander Vrax materialized beside me, his expression unreadable. "Interesting." "She broke every protocol in the manual," I said weakly. "Yes." "She forged credentials, sabotaged station systems, and caused millions of credits in theoretical damage." "Yes." "She got every hostage out alive in less than 9 minutes." "Also, yes." Vrax studied the human on the screen below, who was currently being yelled at by Renix for reasons I could not quite hear. "Run a full background check. Deep level. I want to know everything about Kira Vale." "Sir, her file is already—" "I do not care what her file says. Find out who she really is." The deep background check came back 3 hours later, and I wished immediately that it had not. Kira Vale was indeed human, aged 22 standard cycles, born on a frontier colony called New Cardiff that most galactic citizens could not find on a map if their lives depended on it. Standard education, unremarkable childhood, no military family connections. She had applied to the Institute through the regular admission process and passed all entrance exams with scores that were good but not exceptional. On paper, she was completely ordinary. The problem was what was not on paper. There were gaps, lots of gaps. 2 full cycles where her location could not be verified. 3 different identity markers that led to dead ends. Financial transactions that made no sense for someone with her supposed background. And buried deep, deep in the classified sections that required authorization I technically did not have, was a single notation. Subject of interest, Terran Intelligence Corps. Handle with extreme caution. I showed Vrex the report in his private office, a space designed for conversations that could not be overheard by any sensor array ever invented. He read it twice, then set it down carefully. So, the humans sent us a spy. It appears that way, sir. Wrapped up as a normal cadet. Yes, sir. With skills that make our best operatives look like academy washouts. That would be an accurate assessment, sir. Vrax leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. What is she looking for? That was the question, was it not? The Galactic Military Institute was prestigious, certainly, but it was not exactly a treasure trove of sensitive intelligence. We trained future officers in tactics, strategy, and leadership. Important work, but hardly worth inserting a deep cover agent, unless she was not here for the training. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. What if she is not looking for something? I said slowly, working through the implications as I spoke. What if she is establishing credibility, building a cover identity that will hold up under scrutiny for years? What if this is the beginning of something much larger? Brax considered this, his scales shifting color slightly as they always did when he was thinking hard. The humans are planning something. The humans are always planning something, sir. That is what makes them so terrifying. A fair point. In the 12 cycles since humanity had joined the coalition, they had proven themselves to be exactly as unpredictable and dangerously creative as their reputation suggested. They did not follow conventional military doctrine because they barely understood it existed. They did not respect traditional power structures because they had built their entire civilization on the principle of questioning authority. And they absolutely, positively, did not play by rules they did not agree with. Continue monitoring her, Vrax ordered, but do not interfere. If the Terran Intelligence Corps wants to spend resources placing an agent in our academy, let them. She might learn something useful. We certainly will. And if she is here for something more dangerous, then we will deal with it when the time comes. He smiled, showing far too many teeth. In the meantime, I am quite interested to see how she handles the advanced combat simulations. She certainly made that hostage extraction look entertaining. The next training cycle brought new challenges, and Kira's team continued to approach them with the same combination of creativity and barely controlled chaos. They turned a defensive fortification exercise into an offensive strike by convincing the simulation that their position had already fallen, and they were actually an enemy infiltration team. They solved a complex diplomatic negotiation by having Bricks pretend to be drunk and accidentally reveal crucial information that made both parties realize they were being manipulated by a third faction. They won a zero-gravity combat scenario by using Kel's flight harness to create an improvised gravitational sling that launched Renix into enemy positions like a very large, very angry missile. The other teams were starting to notice. More specifically, they were starting to complain. "It is not fair," whined a Cauldrian cadet named Thorax during an instructor meeting. "She does not follow proper procedures." "She gets results," countered instructor Misha, who had been won over by the creative chaos after Kira's team had solved one of her impossible navigation puzzles by having Lissa calculate a hyperspace microjump that should not have worked, but somehow did. "She makes us all look incompetent." "Then perhaps you should be more competent," Vrax said mildly, and that ended that discussion. But the resentment was building. I could feel it in the way other cadets looked at Kira's team, in the whispered conversations that stopped when instructors approached, in the deliberate exclusion from informal social gatherings. The Institute was supposed to foster cooperation and unity among the various species of the Coalition. But instead, we were watching fault lines form around a single human who seemed genuinely unbothered by the growing isolation. "Does it not concern you?" I asked her one day, finding her alone in one of the observation lounges overlooking the training grounds. "Being so universally disliked?" She did not look up from the tactical manual she was reading. "Should it?" "Most beings prefer social acceptance. Most beings are idiots." She flipped a page. "They spend so much energy worrying about what others think that they forget to actually accomplish anything useful." That is a rather cynical view. It is an accurate view. Now she did look up, and those gray eyes fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. "You want to know why I really came here, Registrar Kelvin?" I absolutely did, but I was not about to admit it. "Your reasons are your own, Cadet. I came here because Earth needed someone to prove we belong in this coalition. Not as junior partners, not as the violent newcomers everyone is afraid of, but as equals." She smiled that not nice smile again. "And the only way to prove that is to be undeniably better. Better at breaking rules, better at winning." She stood, tucking the manual under her arm. "The rules were written by species that have been doing this for centuries. If humans follow those rules, we will always be playing catch-up, always be one step behind. But if we change the game itself," she shrugged, "then maybe we have a chance." She walked away, leaving me with the uncomfortable realization that I had just been told something important, something that probably should have been reported immediately to Commander Vrax. I did not report it. I am still not entirely sure why. The first major evaluation came at the end of the initial training cycle. All teams would face a comprehensive combat simulation, the details of which were kept classified until the moment they entered the scenario. It was designed to test everything they had learned: tactics, teamwork, adaptability, and grace under pressure. Kira's team drew the fourth slot, which meant they had to wait while watching 3 other teams attempt the challenge on the display screens in the waiting area. Team 1 lasted 18 minutes before their commander made a critical error that got half their squad killed. Team 2 did better, making it 29 minutes before getting overwhelmed by superior numbers. Team 3 actually completed the primary objective, but lost so many people in the process that it was ruled a tactical failure. "Lovely," Brix muttered, flexing his 4 arms nervously. "We are definitely going to die." "Probably," Kira agreed cheerfully, "but let us make it spectacular." They entered the simulation chamber, a massive space that could reconfigure itself into any environment the scenario required. The lights dimmed, holographic projectors activated, and suddenly they were standing in a ruined city under a red sky. with the sound of distant weapons fire echoing through empty streets. The mission parameters appeared on their helmet displays. Hold the central command post for 30 minutes against increasing enemy forces. Reinforcements would arrive at the end of the timer, but only if the post remained in friendly hands. Standard defense scenario. Straightforward. Brutally difficult. Most teams immediately moved to fortify the command post, setting up fields of fire and establishing defensive perimeters. Kira looked at the building for approximately 3 seconds, then turned to her team. "We are not defending that." "What?" Renix stared at her. "That is literally the mission." "The mission is to hold the post for 30 minutes. She pointed at a partially collapsed structure about 200 meters away. "That building has a clear line of sight to the command post. If we hold that position, we can prevent anyone from getting close enough to take the post. Technically, we are still defending it." "That is not what the scenario. Do you want to win, or do you want to follow instructions?" Renix looked at the rest of the team. Lissa was already pulling up tactical calculations. Cal was studying the proposed position with her pilot's eye for strategic advantage. Brix just shrugged all 4 shoulders. "Fine," Renix said. "But when this goes catastrophically wrong, I am putting it in my report that I objected." Noted. They moved to the collapsed building with speed born of weeks training together. Lisa identified structural weak points they could use as ambush positions. Brix used his multiple arms to set up improvised barriers from rubble. Kel positioned herself with a clear view of the sky, ready to call out aerial threats. Renix took the main defensive position with the team's heavy weapon. And Kira vanished. "Where is she going?" Renix hissed into the team channel. "No idea," Lissa admitted. "But I am fairly certain it will be ridiculous and possibly brilliant." The enemy forces arrived exactly on schedule. A mix of infantry units and light armor that would have been overwhelming for a team trying to defend the command post directly. They moved with programmed precision, standard tactical formations designed to overwhelm defensive positions through superior numbers and firepower. They never saw Kira's team until it was too late. The first enemy squad went down to precisely coordinated fire from Renix and Brix. The second squad was caught in a collapse triggered by Lisa, who had identified the exact support beam to shoot to bring half a wall down on their heads. The third squad was strafed by Kel, who had somehow acquired a light combat drone from somewhere and was piloting it with frightening accuracy. And then Kira appeared behind the fourth squad, having apparently circled around through the ruins while everyone else was focused on the main assault. She was carrying a weapon she definitely had not started with, and in the next 30 seconds demonstrated that humans might not be the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy, but they were absolutely, positively, the most terrifyingly creative when it came to violence. The scenario continued like that for the full 30 minutes. Enemy forces kept coming, and Kira's team kept finding new and increasingly improbable ways to destroy them while barely taking any damage themselves. By the time the simulation ended, the command post was still in friendly hands, technically, and the enemy force had been reduced to scattered remnants. Mission success. 0 casualties. Minimal ammunition expenditure. Tactical excellence. Off the charts. In the observation deck, Vrax looked at me. She stole a weapon from a dead enemy during active combat. "Yes, sir." "That should not be possible in a simulation." "No, sir." "And yet?" "And yet." He was smiling again, that toothy expression that probably terrified small children and some adults. "I think I am beginning to like this human." I was beginning to suspect I was too, which was deeply concerning for a number of reasons I did not want to examine too closely. The final evaluation of the cycle was approaching, and everyone knew it would be the real test. Everything until now had been preparation. The final would determine who stayed and who went home. And somewhere in the Institute, Kira Vale was planning something that would probably give Vrax's security team nightmares for cycles to come. I could not wait to see what it was. The announcement came during morning assembly, delivered by Commander Vrax, with the kind of gravitas usually reserved for declaring war or canceling dessert rations. The final evaluation will commence in 72 hours. You will receive no briefing. You will receive no preparation time. You will enter the scenario cold, react to developing situations, and prove whether you deserve to remain at this institute. A collective groan rippled through the assembly hall. Only Kira remained perfectly still, her expression showing about as much concern as someone contemplating which flavor of nutrient paste to select for lunch. Teams will enter individually, Vrax continued, his scales shifting to a darker hue that meant business. You will face opposition from instructors, senior cadets, and environmental hazards. Expect casualties, expect failure, and expect that 70% of you will be sending applications to civilian universities by week's end. Cheerful fellow, our commander. After dismissal, I made my way to the instructor planning room where the final evaluation details were being finalized. What I found there made my secondary stomach perform an uncomfortable flip. You cannot be serious, I said, staring at the scenario outline displayed across 3 hollow screens. Instructor Misha grinned, showing entirely too many teeth. Oh, we are completely serious. This is going to be spectacular. The scenario was called Cascade Protocol, and it was designed by someone with either brilliant tactical imagination or deep psychological problems. Possibly both. Teams would be inserted into a failing space station experiencing cascade system failures, hostile boarding parties, and a ticking countdown to reactor breach. They would need to rescue civilians, repel attackers, repair critical systems, and evacuate before the station exploded. Oh, and they would be operating with limited communications, failing gravity, and a traitor embedded in their team who would actively sabotage efforts at random intervals. This is insane, I protested. The teams barely have 3 months of training. This scenario would challenge veteran special operations units. Which is precisely why it is perfect, Vrax said, materializing behind me in that unnerving way he had. We need to see how they respond when every advantage is stripped away, when following protocol means certain death, and when leadership becomes the difference between survival and catastrophe. You want to break them. I want to forge them. He studied the scenario details with the expression of a master craftsman examining raw materials. Those who survive this will be ready for anything the galaxy throws at them. And Kira's team? Something flickered across Vrax's face. Interest? Anticipation? Possibly mild indigestion from the morning meal? I have special plans for them. That sounded ominous. The 72 hours passed with agonizing slowness, filled with cadets frantically studying theoretical scenarios, running extra drills, and generally radiating the kind of nervous energy that makes everyone around them twitchy. The Institute's meditation chambers were booked solid. The combat simulators ran 24-hour rotations, and the medical bay preemptively stocked extra supplies for treating stress-induced illnesses. Kira spent the time reading. Not tactical manuals or strategic treatises or historical battle analyses. Novels. Actual recreational fiction about things completely unrelated to military operations. When Renix finally worked up the courage to ask what she was doing, she looked up with that blank expression and said, "Relaxing. You should try it. The final evaluation is in 12 hours. Yes, which means spending those 12 hours panicking will accomplish nothing except making me tired and irritable. She turned a page. I perform poorly when tired and irritable. Therefore, I am reading about a detective who solves murders using only observations about dirt. It is surprisingly engaging. Renix looked like he wanted to argue, realized he had no counter-argument that made sense, and walked away muttering in his native language about humans being completely incomprehensible. I privately agreed. The evaluation began at dawn, or what passed for dawn, in a space station that operated on artificial cycles. The first team entered the scenario chamber with visible confidence, emerging 47 minutes later with visible trauma and a 62% casualty rate. They had identified the traitor too late, failed to prioritize rescue operations, and ultimately evacuated with less than half their civilian charges. The second team did marginally better, lasting 53 minutes and saving approximately 70% of the civilians. They lost their team leader to a catastrophic decompression event and spent the final 15 minutes operating without coordinated command structure. The third team actually completed all primary objectives but exceeded the time limit by 4 minutes, which meant they theoretically died in the reactor explosion. Their commander filed a formal complaint about unrealistic timing constraints, which was immediately dismissed on grounds that reality does not care about your complaints. By the time Kira's team was called, the atmosphere in the observation deck was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Every instructor, every senior officer, and every cadet who had already completed their evaluation crowded around the viewing screens. Even Commander Vrax abandoned his private monitoring station to watch from the main deck. "Do you think she has figured it out?" Misha asked quietly. "Figured what out?" I replied, though I had my suspicions. "That we modified their scenario, added extra complications, made the traitor more convincing, gave them half the time and twice the opposition." She glanced at Vrax. "We wanted to see if she could adapt when the rules changed without warning. You wanted to see if you could break her." "That too." The team entered the chamber, which immediately transformed into a section of space station corridor, with emergency lighting casting everything in harsh red shadows. Alarms blared. The floor tilted at a sickening angle indicating failed gravity stabilizers. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded with enough force to rattle the walls. Kira surveyed the chaos for exactly 2 seconds, then turned to her team. "Standard Cascade Protocol scenario. We have approximately 45 minutes before reactor breach. Primary objectives: rescue civilians, repel boarders, repair critical systems, evacuate safely. Secondary consideration: one of us is a traitor." Kel's wing membranes fluttered nervously. "How do you know about the traitor?" "Because I read the instructor evaluation guidelines 6 weeks ago when I accidentally discovered they were stored on an unsecured server." She said this with the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. The traitor mechanic shows up in 87% of final evaluations. It tests trust, paranoia management, and adaptive leadership under betrayal scenarios. In the observation deck, 3 instructors suddenly looked very interested in their feat. "So what do we do?" Renix asked. "Try to identify who it is?" "No. We operate under the assumption that everyone might be compromised and design our approach accordingly. Lisa, you handle system repairs, but you work alone. Kel, you manage evacuation routes, but you report positions through me, not through team channels. Brix, you engage hostiles, but you coordinate through hand signals. Renix, you handle civilian rescue, but you maintain visual confirmation of everyone at all times." She paused. and I will manage overall command while simultaneously investigating who is trying to kill us." "That seems complicated," Brix observed. "It is. But it is less complicated than everyone dying because we trusted the wrong person." She checked her weapon, a standard-issue rifle that she immediately began modifying with components pulled from her equipment belt. "Move out. Clock is running." What followed was 37 minutes of the most impressive operational efficiency I had ever witnessed. The team split up according to Kira's directions, each member operating semi-independently, while maintaining loose coordination through a communication system that was deliberately redundant and difficult to sabotage. Lisa reached the primary power junction and began repairs, her four-fingered hands dancing across control panels with mathematical precision. Every 30 seconds, she reported progress through a coded system that prevented anyone from knowing exactly what she was doing until it was complete. Cal mapped evacuation routes through sections of the station that were theoretically inaccessible, using her pilot's understanding of three-dimensional space to find paths that the scenario designers had not anticipated would be discovered. She guided civilians through maintenance shafts, cargo bays, and one memorable sequence involving an external hull walk that should have been impossible but somehow worked. Brix engaged the hostile boarding parties with enthusiastic violence, using all four arms to wield multiple weapons simultaneously in a display that was equal parts terrifying and mesmerizing. He fought like someone who had studied every combat form in the galaxy and decided they were all wrong, creating his own style that involved a lot of improvised throws and absolutely no regard for personal safety. Renix coordinated civilian rescue with the grim efficiency of someone who understood that you cannot save everyone, but you can definitely try. He made hard choices, prioritized children and injured first, and maintained calm authority, even when a panicking family tried to rush an airlock that was clearly marked as compromised. And Kira moved through the chaos like a ghost, appearing where she was needed, disappearing when her presence was not required, and slowly, methodically, gathering evidence about who the traitor was. 23 minutes into the scenario, Brix reported that his weapon had mysteriously jammed during a critical firefight. 25 minutes in, Lisa discovered that someone had introduced false data into the repair calculations she was running. 28 minutes in, Cal's evacuation route was suddenly blocked by a bulkhead that sealed itself for no apparent reason. At minute 30, with 15 minutes remaining before theoretical reactor breach, Kira called the team together in a central junction point. "The traitor is Renix," she announced. Every head turned. Renix looked genuinely shocked, which was either excellent acting or genuine surprise. "What? I have been saving civilians this entire time." "Yes, you have. You have also been subtly steering them toward sections of the station that will be compromised first when the reactor goes critical. You jammed Brix's weapon using a scrambler you picked up during the civilian rescue operations and claimed it came from a hostile. You fed false data to Lisa through a backdoor communication channel you established before we split up. And you sealed the bulkhead that blocked Kel's route using command overrides that only someone with security clearance beyond standard cadet level would possess." The silence that followed was absolute. "But here is the interesting part," Kira continued, and now she was smiling, that dangerous smile. "You are not actually a traitor. You are a plant. Probably one of the instructors using a holographic overlay to impersonate Renix, while the real Renix is sedated somewhere watching this on a screen and wondering why everyone thinks he is terrible at his job." In the observation deck, Instructor Toller suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. The fake Renix flickered once, twice, then resolved into the very embarrassed form of Instructor Jerix, a special operations trainer known for his holographic infiltration expertise. "How did you know?" he asked weakly. "Renix does not use contractions when he is stressed. You used 17 in the last 30 minutes. Also, his left shoulder plating has a small dent from a training accident 3 weeks ago. Your hologram does not include that detail." She turned to the rest of her team. 11 minutes until breach. Lysa, finish those repairs. Kel, get every remaining civilian to evacuation base 7. Brix, you are with me. We need to clear a path through the primary corridor because I am fairly certain the instructors have planned one final surprise for us. She was correct. The final surprise came in the form of a heavy assault team materializing in the main evacuation corridor, armed with weapons that should not have been available in a training scenario and armored enough to make even Brix pause. "That is not standard opposition," Brix said, which was perhaps the understatement of the cycle. "No, it is not." Kira studied the assault team with the expression of someone doing complex mathematics in her head. "They want to see if we can adapt when outgunned and outmatched." "Can we?" "Define we." She pulled something from her belt that looked suspiciously like a thermal charge. "I can adapt. You might want to find cover." What happened next violated approximately 17 safety protocols and caused 3 separate instructors to reach for emergency scenario shutdown controls. Kira used the thermal charge to breach an external wall, creating explosive decompression that sent the assault team tumbling into space. Before anyone could process what had happened, she used the same decompression to propel herself and Brix through the breach, across a gap of open vacuum that should have killed them both, and into the evacuation bay where Kel had assembled the remaining civilians. They sealed the bay, activated emergency launch, and evacuated the station with exactly 90 seconds to spare before the theoretical reactor breach. Mission complete. All objectives achieved. 0 casualties. One extremely traumatized instructor who would need therapy after being ejected into simulated space. The scenario chamber powered down. The recruit team stood in the center of the now empty space, breathing hard and looking vaguely confused about still being alive. Commander Vrax descended from the observation deck with an expression I could not read. He walked up to Kira, studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. "That," he said, "was the most reckless, protocol-violating, rule-breaking performance I have ever witnessed." "Thank you, sir." "It was also brilliant." He looked at the rest of the team. "You all pass. Congratulations. You are now officially students of the Galactic Military Institute." The celebration was immediate and loud. Renix, who had been retrieved from his sedation chamber, hugged everyone despite not entirely understanding what had happened. Lisa performed calculations about their success probability that made her feel better. Kel did a small aerial victory dance. Brix flexed all 4 arms and declared it was time for celebratory violence, by which he meant competitive sports rather than actual fighting. Kira stood apart from the celebration, as she always did, watching her team with something approaching satisfaction. I approached her carefully. "You knew about all the modifications to your scenario." "Of course." "And you still did not warn your team." "Telling them would have made them nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." She glanced at me. "Besides, they needed to learn that in real operations, the parameters always change, the intelligence is always wrong, and the people in charge are usually making things up as they go along." "That is a cynical view of command structure." "It is an accurate view. The best commanders are not the ones who follow perfect plans. They are the ones who adapt when those plans inevitably fail." She paused. "You are going to ask me why I really came here now, are you not?" I had been, actually. The thought had crossed my mind. I came here because Earth needs people who can operate in the galactic military framework while maintaining the creative chaos that makes humanity dangerous. I came here to prove we can be trained without being tamed. And I came here because someone needs to teach your instructors that the rules they have been using for centuries might need updating. Those are good reasons. They are practical reasons. The good reason is that I wanted to see if I could do it. She smiled, and for once it reached her eyes. Turns out I can. The graduation ceremony, 3 cycles later, was everything you would expect. Speeches about honor and duty, awards for various achievements, and formal commissioning of new officers into their respective military services. Kira's team received commendations for tactical excellence, which probably would have meant more if they had not spent the entire ceremony trying not to laugh at the official descriptions of their various exploits that made everything sound much more proper and professional than it had actually been. Commander Vrax gave the keynote address, speaking about adaptation, innovation, and the importance of questioning assumptions while still respecting the foundations of military tradition. It was a good speech. It was also carefully crafted to avoid mentioning that one particularly troublesome human had spent the past 3 months making everyone reconsider their entire approach to tactical education. After the ceremony, I found Kira on one of the observation platforms overlooking the planet below, a swirling mass of blue and green that reminded me vaguely of Earth. "What comes next for you?" I asked. "Advanced tactical operations training, then probably special forces integration. Eventually, maybe command of my own unit." She shrugged. "Depends on whether Earth decides they need me for other things." "Other things?" "Intelligence operations, diplomatic security, cultural liaison work." She glanced at me. "I told you before, Registrar Kelvin. I am here to prove humans belong. That does not stop with graduation. You have proven it already. Your performance was exceptional. My performance was adequate for one person in one academy. There are billions of humans who need to be accepted, trusted, integrated." She looked back at the planet. This was just the beginning. "A fair point. For what it is worth," I said carefully, "you were right about something you said early on, about changing the game instead of playing by rules designed by others. You did change things here. The instructors are already revising training protocols based on your approaches. Future cadets will benefit from the creative chaos you introduced." "Good." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for not reporting me when you figured out I was intelligence." I blinked. "How did you know that I knew?" "Because you are good at your job, and your job involves noticing things that do not add up. You knew something was unusual about me within the first day. You probably had my background checked within the first week. And you absolutely figured out my actual assignment by the time I completed that first hostage simulation." She smiled. "You did not report it because you were curious what would happen. Also because you are fundamentally decent and decided that whatever I was doing probably was not actively harmful to the Institute. Are you reading my mind now?" "Just reading people. It is a useful skill." She pushed off from the railing. "I should get back. My team wants to celebrate properly, which apparently involves consuming questionable substances and engaging in recreational activities that will probably get us all disciplined. Sounds perfectly reasonable for new graduates." "Glad you approve, sir." She saluted with only moderate sarcasm, then paused. "One more thing. The next human cadet who arrives here, the one who will show up in approximately 6 weeks, if Earth follows the timeline I think they are following, will be nothing like me. They will be loud, enthusiastic, probably, too, friendly, and almost certainly will violate different protocols than I did. Please do not judge them based on me. You know who is coming? I know Earth is sending different types of representatives to different institutions. Variety demonstrates range. Range demonstrates capability. Capability demonstrates worthiness. She grinned. It is all very calculated. The humans are good at this game, Registrar. You should remember that. She left before I could respond, which was probably for the best because I had no idea what to say. 6 weeks later, a human named Marcus Webb arrived at the Institute with enough enthusiasm to power a small city, immediately befriended half the cadet corps, and violated protocol by organizing an unauthorized sporting event that somehow turned into an official Institute tradition. He was nothing like Kira, except for the part where he made everyone reconsider their assumptions and proved humans could excel through completely different approaches. 8 weeks after that, a human named Yuki Tanaka arrived and revolutionized our entire approach to logistics and supply chain management through methods that involved chaos theory and what she called organized pandemonium. 12 weeks after that, humans started arriving regularly, each one unique, each one capable, each one proving in their own way that humanity deserved their place in the galactic community. And I stood at my admission desk, processing each arrival, watching the galaxy change one human at a time, and thinking about the day Kira Vale had walked through those doors with a worn bag and eyes like deep space. She had been right about so many things. The rules did need updating. The game did need changing. And humans absolutely, positively belonged here. I just wished someone had warned me how exhausting it would be to keep up with them. Commander Vrax appeared beside me, watching the latest batch of human cadets create cheerful chaos in the orientation hall. Any regrets about approving that first human admission? Many, sir. So very many. But you would do it again? I watched a human cadet attempt to explain Earth football to a confused Zenthari, using wild gestures and sound effects that were probably not technically necessary. Another human was demonstrating something called breakdancing, which appeared to violate several laws of physics. A third was engaged in an intense debate about comparative literature with a Voran professor who looked simultaneously confused and delighted. Yes, sir, I absolutely would. Good. Vrax smiled that toothy smile. Because they are just getting started. The shuttle bay doors opened again. Another group of cadets entered. Among them, 2 more humans, looking around with that mixture of wonder and determination that I had learned to recognize. The galaxy was changing. The Institute was evolving. And somewhere out there, probably causing trouble in creative new ways, Kira Vale was continuing her mission to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. She had succeeded. But more than that, she had shown us that belonging was not about following rules. It was about proving you could contribute something valuable, something unique, something the galaxy needed, even if it did not know it yet. Humans had proven that in spectacular fashion. And honestly, I could not wait to see what they did next, though I was definitely requesting a larger supply of headache medication for my office. Just as a precaution. The stars were watching. The galaxy was waiting. And humanity was just getting warmed up. This was going to be interesting.